So every conference needs to have a panel discussion, this conference as well. And first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Thorsten Schneider. I am the community board leader of the Reverse Engineering.net community board and of the TrackMe's website system. For the others, Nicholas Goulet stands for Software Protection Systems. On this right side, Woodman, he is as well leader of a huge community reverse engineering board. On my left side, Brian Russell, he is dealing more to the topics of information security. And Andrew Griffiths, one of his research is software protection and reverse code engineering of Linux systems. And after the introduction of the people, I just want to tell you that this is a discussion. So we need your help. We are not here just to talk to you. You need to talk to us as well. And you can, of course, talk to each other. So what should be the first provoking topic of this discussion? Well, one of the most statements I've always heard was that software protections are useless. That's true. There's no software protection which has not been cracked yet. So that's a problem. Why are we still discussing about this topic? And we need to do some changes in our thoughts because we're at the beginning of a new age. Most of you know the TCPA, it's a Trusted Computing Platform Alliance. They will introduce several changes which will influence everything in software development, many things for open source development, for Linux systems, and as well for reverse code engineering. And well, it sounds that the dark force is coming, and it is coming. End of this year, the FIT chip will be introduced. So we are standing in front of new tasks to solve. And that's what we like to do to start the discussion. So one question is really, should we deal with the problem of TCPA, or should we run an own road? Should we walk an own road, do more Linux stuff, do separate systems? I'm afraid we will not, because several processor companies like Intel, they will deal with the topic, of course, for commercial thought. And yes, that's the problem we are faced. So,
do you think that it's going to be more fruitful to try and deal with it legally, via consumers, getting consumers to perhaps boycott these systems, or technically by breaking the systems and showing that the protections they're going for can't work? Which one of those paths do you think will be most fruitful?
it's a good question. One possibility is to show that the system is breakable, of course. Reverse engineering such systems might cause several law problems. I'm sure it will be this way. But another possibility is to develop emulators. So one way you can try to emulate the FIT chip to show that there are other possibilities to make software maintainable, to try to let code which is not TCPA confirmed on a different operation system or on a different hardware.
I'm going to try and act as moderator as one of the native U.S. English speakers. They asked me to see if I can do some of the moderation tasks. So the question is if I interpret it correctly, does the panel feel that the TCPA problem, if there is one, is best dealt with legally by setting legislation around that, by consumer action, boycott, or by technical means, i.e. having ways to crack and having ways to emulate it? Any of the other panel members have an opinion on that?
It's probably better if we both have the consumers showing that they don't want it, that it's going to make it more effort for them to do stuff, and also having the technical means to be able to break the system as well, to prove that, one, people don't want it, two, what you're doing is ineffective and it's not worthwhile pursuing. That's my take on the matter.
My opinion is it will have to be done legally. This is the only way that I think we can, basically by doing what we do, we're trying to force them to see that trying to manhandle us is not going to work. They're not going to win. There's always going to be someone who's going to do it. It's inevitable. So I think the only way we're gonna be able to do it is legally, through legal, means. Sooner or later, I believe that they've got to have to relent and acknowledge that, they're not gonna win this.
All right, I have an opinion on this as well, if I might be allowed to provide it real quick. One of the points I was trying to make when I did the keynote on Friday morning was that I think it's important for there to be technical breaks for any kind of a protection scheme, and I think that plays into the legal and consumer arenas. I think it's probably that much a little bit more difficult for the laws to be enforced if it's been technically demonstrated that the protection scheme is not actually effective. Not always the case, there's always going to be examples, but I think if it's become clear that it's one of these things that everybody's doing, then they're going to be that much more reluctant to prosecute if there's some reason for doing so. I think the consumer angle is extremely important because 100 of us here in this room can refuse to go and buy the latest whatever chipset, but it really doesn't make one bit of difference. It's the 10 million that they sell a year is where the real impact comes in. So I think it's important when you have a chance to educate people as to what kind of impact this is going to have on them. I mean, the average consumer, again, my mom with her copy of Windows has no idea how this is going to affect her in a few years. One of my favorite examples of digital rights management, or what people can expect, is how when you play a DVD and it comes up and it shows you previews and you press into the menu and fast forward button and it won't do anything. That's your digital rights management. Did we answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
You've kind of jumped into this just by assuming that people know exactly what's going on, but could you tell me exactly what you think the problems that TCPA are going to introduce are? Because the way I'd heard about it was that the Fritz chip was going to be very passive, analysing the state of the operating system and merely confirming if it was in a previously known state. And then it would have a private key hidden in it that would do a signature of a certificate saying that it currently is in an authenticated state, which it would then communicate to a remote server, and so you'd be able to communicate effectively because they'd know that the operating system isn't compromised or changed by you, effectively, or whoever. And so then they allow secure communication of downloading a movie for $1 or whatever. So if it's purely a passive thing that's authenticating that you're in a particular state, where do you see the problems in that? Isn't that just enabling you to do extra things by authenticating you to the server? And it's not stopping you doing anything that you can do already.
So if I can try to summarize the question I've asked us to repeat it for the audience, is you'd like to hear some more explanation as to why some of the panel thinks it's a problem. As far as your understanding is that it's used for simply a verification step and gives you a way to remotely authenticate yourself to authorize for particular transactions. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah. Well, the most point is that the flip chip is not there just to control movies or similar. The flip chip is to control the complete system. It controls the boot up process, it controls any startup of any application, it checks if any application is licensed, and so on.
So it
That's
isn't
the
just
main
a passive thing?
Pardon me. But that's a big problem. The next problem is that you have the new system tries to license your machine, your box. That's a big problem. You cannot exchange any hardware without changing the key, however. And that's a big problem. You're not allowed to remove any sound card or similar, because this system will be not more licensed. Just try to change your processor.
You're saying that the Fritz chip actually stops you doing things rather than just authenticating you're in the original hardware state that you bought it from Dell or whatever.
Yeah.
You're saying it actually stops you booting up Windows, or it will just stop it, or your operating system choice, or it'll stop you being authenticated as a Virgin Dell system?
Well, it's possible to stop the boot up process. The machine will not boot.
I see.
Or went out, game over for the machine.
Anyone else wanted to comment? We've got a comment from the audience on that. Anybody else first? Go ahead.
I think one of the key concerns with regards to that specifically is that there will be content that will only be available to specific players. And the content doesn't necessarily have to be restricted to movies or music. It could be websites, for example. So you would end up with large portions of computing activities that would only be available to authenticated systems, and those authenticated systems would obviously be under the control of a small number of players. And
the
so
point of that is a lack of privacy and an increase in corporate control.
it's an increase of corporate control. It would be a way of closing off large sections of the internet. Large sections of functionality would only be available running under these trusted systems.
And presumably if the private key is unique in each chip, that'll allow them to track people
Presumably.
as individuals.
Yeah, if that was written into, if part of the trusted software was a tracking mechanism, there would be no way to remove that.
Also, another kind of problem is it reduces competition in the market, which in the computer, look at how far the computer industry has developed on a whole with competition. So by removing competition from it, it's going to have negative effects.
In what ways to remove competition?
Well, for example, with signing programs, binaries and that, a small software company now has to go through the effort of getting their stuff signed. This signing process will involve paying lots of money. Therefore, it's a lot more effort for a single developer to write software to run on people's machines. That's another one example. For what people want to use for their media plays, for example, you've got one piece of software which will only work.
Sure, yeah.
If people can't develop another piece of software that works with it, that also reduces the possibility for competition in the market.
But when you were talking about having to buy a certificate, I thought the point was that sure you could get a certificate which would allow you to authenticate the code, but I thought you could still choose to run it up in a separate memory space allocated for non-blade, whatever you want to call it, programs. I thought you could still run home ones and just choose to trust the developer as you can now.
I imagine over time this will not be allowed anymore. They'll just say now there's been too many issues with it, etc. And they'll just say you're going to have signed programs no matter what. This will also be a good running scheme for Microsoft, for example, because they'll get to control the keys for it. The people who do the hardware will also get to control it.
I'm not convinced Microsoft will ever kill the development community effectively, because that's what they'd be doing by saying.
You'll probably be able to buy special machines that will allow you to run when they come down to it. But otherwise,
I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think Microsoft will that great.
give it time.
I'd like to make a comment in reply to that, if I might. I don't actually know what the capabilities are of the latest chipset that Intel supposedly is trying to slipstream, which is the current driver of the discussion. I'm somewhat familiar with what some of the early Palladium plans were, which is Microsoft's implementation of what they'd be doing with the trusted computing base. Actually, I interviewed Microsoft for a job red teaming the kernel for that a couple of years ago, and learned some interesting stuff. My take on it is that I think people have a pretty good idea of what some of the capabilities are that the platform could do. For example, it's pretty clear that if you've got the authenticating chipset on your motherboard and your BIOS, for example, is designed to only allow certain boot processes, clearly you can make your machine only boot certain things, which it's kind of antiquated now, but that would eliminate boot sector viruses, for example. We're making a lot of assumptions, though, about what people are going to do with the capabilities, and that's one of the questions we don't know the answer to for sure. I sense a lot of mistrust that people don't necessarily believe that the big media companies and Microsoft won't take maximum advantage. I'm not sure why the mistrust there exists. But so I think there's a lot of assumptions that, or a lot of discussion that says, should they take maximum advantage, this is the capability they can lock us down to. So that's where some of the discussion is going, I believe. Another question over here?
Yeah, well, as I say, these chip programs will run isolated from each other. So you will have a protected memory, like kind of black box memory. Imagine software bundle. So you will still be able to know what goes inside and what comes out, but you won't be able to see what happens, like a download you cannot track. So The real problem, in my opinion, here is spyware. If you cannot see what's going on, just think what kind of horrible spyware they can do. That's the problem.
Well, you're still able to analyze code. It's just that you're still able to debug it, you're still able to disassemble it, you're still able to do everything with it you can. Normally, the only thing you can't do is get that remote authentication that the operating system is in that particular state. And so if you're debugging it, then the operating system and the fixture will say, you are in control of this process, it's not running as it normally does. And so Microsoft.com or wherever you want to say, won't let you download stuff, but you can still locally analyze the program as it's running.
I'm not sure about that. We'll see. I doubt it because the idea of the thing, if I'm not mistaken, but if I am correctly, the idea of the thing is exactly to have a software black box that you cannot look inside. You can see what comes out and what goes in, but you cannot see the workings.
Sure, yeah. You can still take it out of that state. It just disconnects you from authenticating with the server from that. You can still do it offline.
I'm not sure. We'll see.
Let me interrupt you guys for a second, so I'll see if I can summarize some of this for the audience who can't hear. The statement or question over here, I believe it was, he's under the impression that the TCPA stuff is going to act as a black box. And so you can see the information going into it, and you can see the output coming out from it, but you won't necessarily be able to examine the internal state. Is that fair? And so one of the specific examples he gave was, imagine that your spyware that everybody's getting infected with is running in the black box state. The gentleman who's responding to him was indicating that no, you'll still be able to analyze the code that's going into the black box. You're essentially still loading programs into it so you can do your analysis step.
You just can't communicate with the servers.
Say that again?
You just can't authenticate with the servers being an emergent state.
Okay, you can't authenticate with the server in emergent state. You had a response?
Yes. Imagine that I'm going to give you two possibilities of programs. One would be where the binary is actually encrypted and the server contains the key. So at that point, you would authenticate to the server, it would download the key, you would run the binary, but it would all be in protected memory that you would not have access to. The other portion would be if the server actually contained a large amount of remote code that you would download again and run in protected memory space. In both of those cases, you wouldn't have access to what's happening. I wouldn't think that spyware would be a problem per se unless it was authenticated spyware, which probably would exist. Sure.
So his comment was that, well, imagine that what's going into the black box is an encrypted program that actually requires the hidden keys in order to decrypt and write. I think that's a very real possibility. I'm going to reply myself here for a second, and I'll give the rest of the panel a chance. As I mentioned, I actually interviewed with Microsoft for a position along these lines for what they were calling the next generation secure computing base. This is the name that they're using to replace the codename Blade. And I believe the specific plans have been scrapped now, although flavors of it still survive and probably we'll see in Longhorn or some later product. The way it was described to me is that you would actually have a completely parallel kernel running alongside, say, the Windows 2000, based kernel. And the processors, as I described it, both Intel and AMD had added another hard separation mechanism within the processor, a ring -1 or something like that, where you actually feed it a 13-byte Intel instruction that contains 3 D words that have a start address, length, a couple other things like that, which basically says start up an entire virtual processor here on the side, and they can't talk directly to each other. The secure kernel, which is what I was interviewing for, was actually the red team that is running as a completely separate kernel. It's not a Windows API, it's a different API. They were being very concerned about making it secure. And again, to be completely fair, they have to succeed 100% making it secure still. It's still another kernel that can still be attacked, it can still be overflowed if they screw up on the design. Yes, all of the executables that will be running within that kernel would be signed, and probably would have to be signed by Microsoft, or would have to go through some very heavy partnering type mechanism. You want PGP over there, for example. So PGP or competitor would have to make special arrangements probably in order to get their code to be trusted to run over there. Keep in mind that your keyboard goes through the trusted kernel first. your screen comes from the trusted kernel. This acts as a complete filter. So this is where they're talking about Palladium keyboards, Palladium monitors, and video cards. In order to not have your PGP key passphrase stolen when you type it in, you're typing it directly into the secure kernel. And the secure kernel decides, oh, this is for something over in the regular Windows world, go ahead and pass it back through and let them have it. Otherwise, if it's for me, I'm going to hang on to it, do all the operations here, and then I'll pass the encrypted email back over to your secure side. So that was at least one design that was being explored, if that helps clarify things a little bit. Anyone else on the panel want to respond as well?
Well, I definitely feel that an encrypted binary is going to be what's going to happen eventually. I can't see any other way around it. They've already started. You already know when you want to go and get your updates at Microsoft or whatever that, they want to see, they want to know. Is this yours or is this not yours? So, the reality is just a couple more steps down the road. But I think because the exchange at that level, I think it would still be vulnerable. I wrote, I don't know, as a joke a year ago that, the day of ring -3 might very well happen, and it might.
Comment over here?
We're all talking about a new chip here, but talking about encrypted binaries, for me, if they wanted to do that, they could already do it right now. Nothing prevents them from encrypting a binary and getting a key from the server and decrypting.
But the point is, at the moment, you can debug that.
Yeah.
You can run that. You can check that local.
If your binary is encrypted, I don't see how the chip is going to make a difference.
Because the chip can verify that your operating system is in a particular state. It can verify that you're not running it it's like an external box watching what's going on. And you can't break that chip because it's got all these lovely things like they use in bank ATMs.
Yeah. Because as far as the virus is concerned, for example, when you're talking about controlling the boot sequence, you could already do that in the BIOS. And if the BIOS itself could already say, well, I don't want you to put that.
Yes, but the BIOS must be authenticated by freeze.
Yeah. The point is all along that from the very start, it's been authenticated.
But I mean, if they wanted to do that,
They could have done it, but now they're doing it now.
But they wouldn't.
They couldn't do it with existing hardware. No, they do it to make sure that the chip isn't physically compromised.
So his question or comment was, we can do encrypted binaries now, can't you, right? What's the problem? And these two gentlemen here, I'll give you a chance to comment in a second, have indicated that, well, no, actually, what's different here is rather than having a piece of software decrypting another piece of software, you now have a piece of hardware that's doing it for you. I think one of the key points, if you're not already familiar with some of the Palladium efforts, if you're wondering what some of this is one of the key features is that there's a crypto chip on your motherboard now that contains a public-private key pair. You do not have a private key. Okay, you do not have access to that. You can't get it. You have to sand down the chip and break out your electron microscope if you want to try and recover that key off the chip. Unless somebody does a really, really bad implementation that allows some sort of leak. So that's one thing I wanted to clarify on. So no, there is a black box on your motherboard where you put the encrypted binary in and it spits it out somewhere, but it's probably going to spit it out into the secure kernel where you do not have access to it. Comment?
Yeah. Well, there are two ways basically to crack this. The first one is to crack the hardware, so there's a flip chip that works for you. And the second way is to have a good emulator, so a sort of ultra box that can encompass everything. Anyway, I don't know how they will do it, but they will crack it. The problem is that they will glean on this new solution. They will be so happy in the first months that everything will be there. So once you crack it, you will have bank databases, military databases, and the private life of Anderson altogether, because everything will be protected with that. So that's the catastrophe they are going towards.
So if I can paraphrase his responses, he fully believes that it will be cracked, but he sees the problem that people are going to trust it and rely on it and switch over to it. And so therefore you've got somebody who's got it cracked, and then you've got military and banking and other industries treating it as if it's completely secure. Is that a fair summary?
I understand what you're saying, but I think this is definitely something that's going to be used in conjunction with existing ways. I mean, just because you can crack a box locally and they're now willing to send you movies, even though you can spit them out on a DVD, I don't think that means that you'll necessarily be able to get into their systems. I mean, I think there'll still be, I hope, a series.
They stole yesterday 40 million MasterCards numbers, which were pretty good protected.
Yeah. I don't think this will make. But I don't think this is the sort of technique people begin to rely on. I think it's a different tool.
So if I can ask you guys to hold on a second, I've had so far some really good comments from about 4 people.
Why no changed it? My question was, actually, do you think there would be a good way of doing this trusted computing, a way that we could, take advantage of us instead of just fearing it to be under the control of Microsoft?
I have an answer to that one. It would be very useful in the open source world for verifying that kernels haven't been rootkitted. That's a major thing, because the Fritz chip will be able to compare the kernel and the upper sections of the operating system that they are in a state that you've previously set as being an okay state. And so you could use it to verify that OpenBSD or whatever your flavor of Linux is in an authenticated state. So that would be useful too.
So let me repeat the question. The gentleman here is wondering, so are there any good uses for a non-Microsoft world for the technology? Can we take advantage of it? Can we use it for our own purposes in, say, open source software, for example? This gentleman over here is replying to yes. You should be able to use it, hopefully, to do things like the Linux or OpenBSD kernel. Adam, you have a comment?
I think there's a lot of useful uses for the technology. There's one piece of it, which is the remote attestation, which allows your computer to authenticate to another computer. Related to that is the inability to get a private key out of the hardware and make a backup copy of it. Those 2 features are there only for social control purposes, only for commercial control purposes. They don't provide you as an end user of the technology with benefit. There's a lot of benefit to being able to say, yes, I'm running the version of the software I believe I am. I'm only going to do a kernel signed by someone I trust. No one has ever been able to provide me with a benefit to why remote attestation, why no key backup. Because those features are there for the benefit of people selling these.
So I didn't quite understand what remote attestation was.
Remote attestation is the feature of Palladium, of these other trusted computing systems, where the Fritz chip will sign a statement saying, with this key, I verified that the image that I used to start the operating system was signed by that key, and you can't forge that because you don't have the key.
Well, that could be used in a commercial, not a commercial media type thing, but in a business. For instance, to verify that your laptop hasn't been compromised when you're accessing the business VPN. But I agree with you about the key backup, except to say, obviously, it couldn't be a software way to get the key out and reset the key, because then it could be, a virus could easily say, oh, my private key is this. Of course it is. So it would have to be a hardware way to get the key out.
There are good business reasons. There are no good consumer reasons. I'm sorry I didn't hammer on that difference.
Yeah. But I mean, businesses are still consumers from the point of view of my first example. I don't think that for a consumer and then from a security point of view for a business.
To avoid the virus issue, require me to plug a USB key into the motherboard physically.
Yeah, okay.
Or some other action. I flip a switch on the motherboard, which is spring loaded, and as long as I hold it down, I can do something. You can design around that problem and protect yourself from a virus without preventing the export of the key.
Sure.
So if I can paraphrase Adam's statement, which I think is a good one, he sees the ability to verify, binaries in a complete hardware-controlled environment as a positive useful feature. It's good to be able to go and verify that you've got the actual binaries that you think you do. He sees a big problem with this capability for one box to be able to remotely query another one to determine is this the right box? Are you running the right software? Which I think is a good key point. So there is a capability that's in there. We don't quite have, I don't think, as much information on how that works exactly, how that's going to be taken advantage of. And so I think, paraphrase, what your concern is that there's really no good reason to have a box be able to positively identify, this is yes, this is, the particular box that you've been dealing with. Adam, by the way, is giving the talk on anonymous blogging tomorrow.
Something else, it's not really a question, or it's just an interesting comment about breaking the system. If I'm going back again to the movie example, obviously when you download the movie to your system, it'll be doing some sort of watermarking to show that it was you that downloaded it. So if you then spread that, if you've broken the system so that you can download movies for $1 or whatever they're charging for the protected ones, and then you distribute it, they can then find a watermark that's trivially been put in.
No, they will find the guy and will drive.
Yeah, they can find the guy that they sold the drive to, or they can just simply block out
I know,
that ID.
the guy whose Wi-Fi connection I use.
Ah, yes, well.
That's it.
But they can then block out that key, and so you have to break the chip each time you want to pirate a movie. Yeah.
I'm going to take a comment. Does anybody on the panel need to comment on any of the stuff so far? Are you going to say something?
The problem I see is that if it comes true, that we just have a machine which is just running authenticated software. We run into a problem how to develop new software.
Sorry?
How to develop new software. How to use our own tools. It's not possible. Because the tool at the end will not run because it's not licensed. Okay, there's a way you can pay $10,000 and you have a license, a version of your own share of code, which will maybe sell for $10.
That would be simply suicidal for Microsoft to do that, and I don't think that the fridge chip is... I have heard it was a completely passive thing, that all it will do is verify that you are in this state and provide a certificate to say so. It won't, as far as I have understood, there may be new developments that I haven't heard of, but it will simply say that you are in this state. It won't stop you doing anything you can do already. Except, obviously use it.
This is just the first step, though. For all intents and purposes, they're gonna test us easily. They're gonna poke us a little bit to see, and if nobody moves when they poke us, then we'll add a little bit more.
Sure, yeah, but I think specifically in the developer case, they're not stupid. They're not going to kill the entire development community just like that.
No.
Because they have no reason to do that.
No, absolutely, and it won't be just like that. It will naturally be over a matter of time. I think it's possible. Right now, if they want to know, oh, all right, we'll give him his security upgrade because he's got the right key.
Yeah.
What if I wanted to write a plugin for something that I own the license to? And, it goes back to the server and it says, well, he changed the software, shut it off. That could be a plausible thing too.
Yeah,
it could happen.
Question in the back.
Yeah, my question is related but I wanted to know what kind of local actions has the community thought about regarding the fact that, as you know, more knowledgeable of the problem, we must be the general public of that specific problem. I wanted to know if there was any plan, any thoughts.
So this question is there any kind of community action going on to act as preventative for some of the problems that people are seeing develop or assuming will happen? Is there any kind of a preemptive action going on?
It's just developing. I'd say within the last couple of months, this has become a real concern. I think that's why we're, starting to discuss it now to get it out there.
The Intel example, I believe, which is, I think, and again, I'm not even clear that it's true. I've heard a couple conflicting stories. But this is the first example where all of a sudden, apparently, someone just dropped one of these chips on the motherboards we're buying now. And this is only 2 or 3 weeks old.
With regards to the Intel chip thing, recently it came out that it was not a trusted computing thing. From memory, one of the things the Intel chips would let you do was to be able to remotely emit your hard drive to run your operating system on it. I've forgotten what the other option that you did, but it was more of a sysadmin type tool, not a trusted computing thing. Granted, you'd hope that seriously they'd implement the hard drive imaging stuff in a decent way, because it'd rather suck if you like there was a worm or whatever that could rubbish your hard drive and
Make switching the world over to Linux that much easier.
yeah, the Linux worries finally come true.
Any other comments on the social or activism aspects.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that I thought the line in the sand right now would be things like the broadcast flag, wherein you currently have in the United States, the FCC is attempting to mandate that all consumer electronics actually look for and respect a particular flag on digital media. And I believe you had alluded earlier to watermarking.
Yeah.
And if there were to be some kind of legal requirement that players that are developed look for and respect watermarks and any authorization that might go along with those watermarks, that would be a legal attack that would have pretty broad implications towards closing the system.
So his comment was the broadcast flag is an example where here's something similar in concept that's been tried, and so far we've had good luck finding that. I think, if I can comment, I think it's, for us, it's a very knowledgeable, paranoid group of people. It's easy for us to assume that consumers are complete sheep and won't stand up for themselves, won't boycott, will basically let anybody walk all over them. And I think that they tolerate a lot, but I've been very surprised and gratified to see a couple of examples in the past where that's not been the case. People remember the DivX DVDs, which was, this is you have a special DVD player, you buy the DVDs a little bit cheaper, and it would have to phone whenever you wanted to play it and see if you were still allowed to play it, or if you had to pay another $5 for the umpteenth time the kid wanted to watch Little Mermaid. Again, with the DVDs, there was, and it's actually somewhat newish, there's been some attempts to make a DVD that 5 days after you take it out of the special airtight packaging, goes up in flames or something like that. And I would be very, very surprised if that succeeds in the market at all unless they sell it at really throwaway prices. They've talked about it as a rental replacement, but I'm suspicious of that. So my point is that I think it takes quite a bit, but I think if you give the consumers enough pain, they will actually make something fail on the market. So I'm somewhat happy to see that in some cases.
Another good example of that is the unique IDs that are going to be on the potential screens.
The P3 ID, yeah.
They started to do that and turned it off at the last minute because
That's the point. There was such an uproar, and it appeared that everybody, including the corporate buyers, I think, were going to avoid that chip. That everybody immediately put out a BIOS that had a disabled the thing flag, which was that's another good example. Real briefly before I take the next question. How are we doing on time? I know technically we're into the time for the next talk, but we talked about going a little bit longer. For any of the conference organizers in the back, how much longer should we go, or do we need to wrap up? 5 minutes? Okay. Who was to have the comment? Someone here.
Users reacting, you say that you think users are going to react, it's too much now. But the way I see it is these days, people, the only software people buy are people to protect their computer. I mean, a lot of people now run 2 or 3 anti-spyware programs, they're antivirus and everything. So I think that if they start to market this chip, they would just have to say, this is going to increase your security. And everybody will say, yeah, right.
So he's saying that all the spyware you're absolutely sick of.
It will bring some more security because it will close down the computer. So
I think the marketing works to some degree. I think we also have to, I think Microsoft, in order to get the sale, is actually going to have to demonstrate some real benefit that people can live with as well. So, I mean, yeah, they can market it to some degree, but it's also does it actually do that?
The obvious benefit will be, hey, look, now you can download, because we stop these evil pirates, you can download movies from, hey, well, we want all our time. Woo, let's get it.
Possibly.
I like it.
So we only got a couple more minutes left. I'd actually like to shift the discussion a little bit. We haven't had a chance to take advantage of everybody on the panel yet, so to pick on some people. One of the ways that I assume that you'll be able to defeat some of this is to write a complete blatant emulator, for example. So if you're running Linux on your box, OpenBSD, what have you, you can certainly fail to implement the calls to talk to the chipset. You can certainly fail to implement a complete separate parallel kernel. However, while you're doing that, couldn't you also implement a set of calls that at the network level look exactly identical to a real chip.
The problem is that the first chip has a private key on it.
Well, the first chip has a private key, and every network has a private key. So there's still this bootstrapping step where, okay, how do I first demonstrate to the outside world that this brand new machine I just bought out of the box
I think
has
they'll keep
this
a
private key?
database of ones, a valid public.
You think Intel is going to maintain a database all the way through
Yeah.
the consumer's
I
house?
think they will. Yeah. I don't think they'll necessarily say keep a register of who's owned which private key, but I think they'll definitely
They have a database of valid keys.
of valid keys. Yeah.
Or certificates.
Or certificates?
Yeah, they could have certificates, so that your key is signed by the Microsoft key, which you do not have the corresponding private key for.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. So we'll have to look at the implementation. Where I was going with that is, for the last couple minutes here, assume that it's a very straightforward, random private key. And maybe I've been correct in assuming that. That's something I haven't considered before. But I'd like to ask the panel, because I think it plays into some people's expertise. Have you seen systems before where you need to emulate, in something fairly complicated like that? I'm thinking for really well-packed stuff, really nasty viruses, something that takes interpreted code, the Java virtual machines. I'm curious if the group has any thoughts or plans on what it would take to, assuming you can, implement a virtual Palladium. Let's go ahead and start with the end here. Because you got your thoughts on that?
There is a small group of people right now. I don't know if they've advanced to the Palladium part, but there is a small group of people that are definitely working on emulation, and they're very serious about it.
Do you think that we're working point where we'd be able to use the Palladium keyboards with OpenBSD?
I would imagine that would be their end result, but, they're not going to tell me.
Nico, do you have any comments on, in terms of I know you've worked with a lot of Packers, and you wrote one for the, how do you that challenge? In terms of you had to actually emulate some fairly complicated things in order to get the hardware to run. Do you think any of the experience that, this group of people has will play into that? People like yourself have experience with Packers. Is that something you think will apply to being able to write a Palladium emulator?
I don't know. We will see. For now, I have no idea about the future. So I just want to see the first implementation of this before I can say anything.
So you want to get your hands on one and play with it?
Sorry?
You want to get your hands on one and be able to play with it and take it apart?
Yes.
Yeah. I do as well.
Yes, for me, I'm sure we will have an emulator someday, sometime, who knows. But that's a reverse engineering topic, and reverse engineers always love puzzles. And could be a very interesting task. Maybe when the chip is implemented and we have everything on our table, maybe it's very fast fun. Deal between 24 hours or 48 hours. Maybe we have fun over half a year or a year. We don't know. I agree with Nicolas that we first should really have the material to play with at the table, but I'm sure we'll find a way. So, in my opinion, this kind of technology takes my freedom to decide what system I have, what software I have, and what I want to do with my system. And I'm not very lucky with the idea to see that my computer is always connected to some databases of some very, very huge companies who are collecting my data every day, every minute, every second, and I even don't know what they're doing with this information. That's my opinion.
As for myself, I do have faith that whatever is implemented will be cracked or worked around. I'm not particularly worried about that. I don't have no idea how hard it's going to be or how quick it's going to go. Even if some of the software people are having struggle with it, I've got a few friends that are very good hardware hackers. I've seen some very interesting papers about delidding ICs. They've actually taken the caps off the integrated chips and being able to read the states straight off of the little traces on the chip itself. I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that maybe there will be an official list of keys. I'm not sure how practical that's going to be. I suspect there's some attacks that can help there. If they actually went and did a full certificate sign chain whole thing with maybe one single certificate, then I suspect you probably would see the world's first real actual crack RSA 4096 contest take place.
I need to give the whole emulation attack thing a bit more thought, but it seems very feasible. The only problem is that it says going to be an arms race. Okay, we can crack it, they make a better system. We can crack it, they make a better system, so on and so forth. It's a huge waste of resources on both sides just to continually do an arms race like this. It would be better to cut it off at the pass and say, we know it's going to be an arms race and the consumers don't want it, or at least we can convince the consumers they don't want it, and so we just avoid the whole arms race process. That's my pretty much take on it at the moment.
Unfortunately, I think they've already got very far with the hardware side of things. I had a presentation at my university from people that have been looking at ATM machines, the chips they use on ATM machines, and just simply the cost of the equipment that you need to be able to take the covers. I mean, I'm not sure how much of the really hardcore physical protection they're going to be putting on these chips on a mass use basis, but the chips they use in ATMs are incredibly well protected on a hardware level, such that it would cost millions to be breaking it.
But I think also, the comments that, yeah, I don't like arms races either. They're not a lot of fun. Well, sometimes they're fun as a hobby. But I think we would have the advantage of is that we just have to write new software, whereas if we do it right, the other guys just have to ship new hardware, which is always a challenge. So we're out of time. I apologize if we didn't get a chance to get to everybody's questions. I want to thank the panel, and I especially want to thank the audience for the participation and questions and comments. So I think we're probably going to have to clear for the next speaker. So thank you very much.